Peter, I'm going to kick off with you because you're quite unusual in a funny way as a research body in that you don't specialise in science, you don't specialise in the humanities. You covered that sort of almost that what we call interdisciplinarity, and I just love your thoughts on that. How important is that, what Kerry was talking about, of that we have, you know, rounded people, that we ensure that people, you know, that maybe scientists work with artists, etc.
Yeah, well, it's really important, and I mean, we face, you know, serious societal challenges, not least the environmental challenge. So interdisciplinary research is going to become so much more important in the future. I think that's the way that Ireland will move over time, and also the European Union is increasingly, which is obviously a great source of research funding for Europe, is increasingly moving towards a challenge-based approach that draws on an interdisciplinary methodology. What I would say is that the Irish Research Council we're the national funder across all disciplines of basic research. Well, what's actually an important precondition for excellent interdisciplinary research is excellent disciplinary research. So in order to have the best outcomes on interdisciplinary teams, you need the best researchers within their disciplines. And of course, gender is part of that. We need to ensure that the best people, regardless of gender or race or any other factors, are supported within their disciplines. And then I think we need to do more to create the conditions in which interdisciplinary research can happen. It tends to take longer than monodisciplinary research. It generally takes more commitment. It generally takes more funding, so we need to recognise that and create those kind of conditions. So that's kind of where we're coming from a council perspective. In terms of what we do, obviously the starting point is excellence. So we accept applications across all our programmes on a curiosity-driven, non-directed, bottom-up basis, whether it's within disciplines or across disciplines. They're independently peer-reviewed purely on the basis of excellence. And as you've said, we don't prioritise any particular disciplines over others. So that's really important. We do other things to then try and stimulate interdisciplinary research, such as providing funding for workshops where STEM and AHSS researchers can come together, such as in areas like health, climate change, because they're so, it's so important that we bring the finest academics, the finest minds, the most talented researchers, men and women, together, as I said, so we can solve the kind of very complex problems that we face. And as I said, I think for me, the environmental challenge is among the greatest. The future of our planet is really at stake, and this is a day, or these number of days here, are about inspiring people. We need to inspire, I suppose, the next generation to be at the forefront of their fields, but also to be able to work effectively together. Areas such as climate change will require technological solutions, scientific solutions. It'll require massive behavioural change. It'll require economics. So that's a very good example of how we really need, it's not just a luxury, we will need really effective interdisciplinary research in the future. In fact, right now, starting right now, it's a nut that we haven't cracked, but I think the commitment is there. And I think it's also an opportunity for new types of careers. So whereas scientists may have thought about themselves developing careers within particular disciplines, new opportunities including for women, will emerge around interdisciplinary research dealing with really complex problems.
And on that note, talking about the future, I might bring in Lisa and Arlene. Maybe starting with you, Arlene, that idea of, everyone talks about the pipeline, and of course diversity, as Peter was saying, is so much wider than gender. It's so much wider, including demographic background and things like that. How do we get a really inclusive group of people into these areas? Because, traditionally it has been, fairly, I suppose, well-to-do people have ended up in university and
Absolutely. So a lot of universities have access programs where they link in with the communities, the deaf schools in their communities, and they're ensuring a pipeline is feeding into the university. I think it's about 20% is the quoted there, So that's the activity from certainly that I'm aware of for Trinity and DCU actually. I guess at Walton, we have imposed 2 quotas. Our first one is that it's a 50-50 gender balance. And we do quite a bit of strategic marketing. I put myself in the classrooms in the all-girls schools and the mixed schools and the boys' schools. And, the messages, the vocabulary in the message has to slightly change. And then it's one thing to recruit them, but then it's very, very important that my team of educators, the PhD researchers, are gender balanced as well. So that's our first sort of quota that we're trying to drive in terms of, diversity. Our second one is around, we have a quota of 15% of our places are scholarships for deaf school students, or in fact, parents who reach out and say, we just don't have the means, how do we figure this out? And I guess in that respect, again, the visibility of the mentors.
I might get you to explain deaf schools for our
Sure.
international visitors, actually.
Of course,
Sorry.
of course. I think it's an acronym. Perhaps somebody might jump in on that. But it's typically they're schools based in socioeconomic disadvantaged backgrounds, and there's an underrepresentation of these types of people at university, and it's an issue for everybody. And at the program, our Walton Club program, I feel if we get them in, how do we nurture them and make sure that they thrive? And I feel we've recruited educators who have come through the DESH access into the university and are now PhD researchers. And you highlight that success of their journey, and they're quite open about that. And that's this inspirational role model piece. And a wise woman once told me, you cannot be what you cannot see, Anne. And, I take that quite literally. So it's a more holistic approach to recruitment and the experience itself, and then ensuring that our learning environments are gender neutral as well. So sometimes that can be as simple as the analogies we choose. We don't talk about cars all the time, for example.
Yeah.
So this is just a bit more consciousness around that.
I love that. And Lisa, your engineering classes every year, do they tend to all look very similar, or?
Yeah, down to the hairstyle sometimes. In Ireland, we've stalled at about 17% female in our engineering classes. And when I studied engineering 25 plus years ago, it was about 12. So we went from nothing to about 12%, and then it's taken decades to creep up. But we've pretty much stalled. And then there are pockets where it's higher than that. So our biomedical engineering class frequently has more than 50% females. They study 80% the same as what the mechanical engineering class do, and there may be no female at all in the mechanical engineering class. So perception is actually a big part of this, and you do have to go quite back in the system in terms of years. So what's happening now with the Irish government's innovations around STEM education and teacher education in particular around STEM subjects is so important, because unless you light that fire of excitement in 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, you're not going to have an 18-year-old to attract into the engineering world. And in terms of access from socioeconomically disadvantaged groups, in DCU we have the longest running access program in the country, and it's longer than 20 years. I think we celebrated 21 years a while ago. The students do really well. And at one point somebody came to the university and said, we'd like to offer a scholarship to a female student in engineering who's come through the access program. I couldn't find one. And the reality is, while the access program is really successful, very few students come through with a mathematics background from those schools to enable them to take the engineering program. So you have to go way back to the beginning in order to make sure that you have the students to bring through. What I would say is the 17% of students who are female who arrive into the classes know exactly why they're there. They've run the gauntlet of every relative who went, you're going to do what? They've researched the degree. You don't meet them in November saying, this isn't really what I was expecting. Whereas we meet young men who are in that situation because they go down through a list. I might do this, I might do that, I might do the other, I might do engineering. And people around them go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they're not challenged. So they can find themselves sometimes that they've made a choice that they hadn't researched very well, but not the young women.
Absolutely. And am I right that, coming back then to fourth level, and research, the IRC has done research into gender? Am I right?
Yeah, well, we have a gender strategy and action plan for 2013. I was just looking at statistics yesterday on the numbers of female postgrads on our STEM side, and interestingly, in our last Government of Ireland postgraduate scholarship intake, we had more women in STEM than men, which is really encouraging.
Wow.
Yeah, so we would make about 100 awards in STEM at postgraduate level every year, and in the most recent intake there were more females than males, which is really encouraging. Now when you get up to a fellowship, it actually flips slightly.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you can start to see the drop off almost straight away.
Yeah.
And we were talking just off stage about that whole pipeline issue.
Yeah.
It's so important. And when you look at the most prestigious research opportunities in Europe, which is generally considered to be the European Research Council, women are quite underrepresented. So the starting and consolidator grants, which are major grants, a benchmark of global excellence, 30% of applicants are women. And then when you get to the advanced grant, which is at the pinnacle of the European Research Council, only 15% of applicants are women. Now the success rates are broadly similar, so women are as successful, but there's clearly an issue with the pipeline. So we've a lot to do nationally and internationally to address that.
Yeah, just one thing to add there. One trend that I've noticed is that the makeup of the new Ireland, so that the mixture of cultures that we're beginning to have in Ireland is beginning to show up in the university classrooms. And we would see high participation rates from first generation Irish kids whose parents came from Nigeria or came from the Far East or the Middle East or wherever, where actually maybe culturally engineering is viewed differently to what it might be in traditional Irish families and households. And that's a very positive thing. I think, to see that engineering education and tech education is reflecting that new Ireland, and that push from outside influence is actually, in a very positive way, towards STEM and towards engineering, is beginning to show through. And it's just a sort of a glimmer I've been watching and thinking, that's interesting.
I love that. I love that. That's amazing if that happens by osmosis almost, that there's kind of almost that reverse effect. I really love it. I've got the clock flashing at me already. The morning is flying by. I can't thank you enough. Thanks a million for having a chat with me about that. And watch out for these people. You'll hear more about them during the year. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.